Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Environmental Coffee House. I am Sandy Shallis, and tonight I have a treat, but she's not live with me. I had to record this today with Carolyn Baker, the author and psychologist and Cassandra Grandmother of the Collapse Aware. It was a really good one, and I think you're going to like it. I hope you're going to like it. I do want to say that it is a very, very serious tornado night in the United States, in the Midwest. It's a month or two early for all these tornadoes, so we can talk about that after the interview. I'm going to play the interview and I'm going to stay with you in the chat while this is playing. And I hope you guys listen, enjoy, learn while people are joining. I'll just say, Kim, thank you for being here and moderating. Hello, Karen. Hello, Steve. Hi, Trulia. David. Jim McHenry. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, St. L and Christine. And yo mama. Hello, baby. Yo mama. Jeffrey Pearson. All right. So I think, do we have enough people to get started? Sure. Why not? All right, because it's not super long, but it was pretty good, and I will be here with you. So I'm going to watch with you. I'm probably not going to chat. I'm just going to run the show. But it is wonderful to see you. And yes, Jennifer's not with me this Friday, but I'm sure she's going to be back with me next Friday night. So let's get going. Okay. Well, welcome, Carolyn Baker. It is such a pleasure to have you back on Environmental Coffee House. The last
It
time,
is so good to be here.
oh, it's great. The last time we were talking, it was Jennifer, you and I, and we were
Yeah.
reviewing radical regeneration and
hmm
the points that you were giving us and the tips you were giving us to help get through the predicament we're in. And I want to thank you for that. So, for those of you who don't know who Carolyn is, she is an amazing author. Carolyn is a psychologist. Carolyn worked 17 years in the industry. But the main thing is, Carolyn is our Cassandra grandmother of this collapse aware movement.
Yeah.
And she's the person who guides us in our spiritual journey to live full lives or even understand the world outside of us. So she's written two newer books that we're going to dive into today. And the book is Undaunted, and the other one that I'm very much interested in is Confronting Cristofascism, because I am diving into that and I'm making videos on that topic on my other channel. So
Good.
welcome.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm so glad to be back. Thank you so much.
And you look great. You look great. All right. Well, let's start with for the new people that may not know you. Um, what is collapse trauma? I mean, what are we going through? You know, maybe they don't. Some people may not know how to articulate what we're going through. Help us.
Well, I don't know anyone on this planet who has not been traumatized in some way at some time in their lives. Because that is the nature of industrial civilization. It is inherently traumatizing. That's one thing. And then if you are learning about collapse, if you're researching it, making any kinds of preparation, yeah, that's, I think, additionally traumatizing. And that's why I've become very cautious in recent years about talking about it and, not wanting to force it down anybody's throat because, in terms of my own background, that was done to me with religion. That's number one. And number two is what we're facing around us, experiencing around us all the time is traumatizing, whether we
Oh,
realize it or not,
oh, I
right?
realize it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And whether we think about it or not consciously, it's affecting us, it's traumatizing us.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be aware of how to heal trauma, which we can do even in this situation. And I believe this situation has brought forth more and more skillful people who are teaching us how to heal our trauma. And I can talk about that in more detail as we go on.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that one. I suppose I wanted to talk about a little bit about, well, first of all, because we're going to go down a road with the Confronting Cristofascism book, let's just double back, though, to Undaunted first
Sure.
and talk about the new book, Undaunted, why you wrote it, and who is it for? Who are you speaking to and who are you reaching out to?
Okay, let's talk about why I wrote it.
Okay.
Why I wrote it is that I've written many books on collapse, and I really felt last year, or I'm not sure, 2021, I think is when I began thinking about Undaunted. Um, I really felt like it was time to change our attitude from thinking of ourselves as victims, like, oh, this terrible thing is happening to me and the planet, and pull up our big girl and boy pants and and in the words of Stephen Jenkinson, who said, we're living in dangerous times. We can either accept this as an affliction or as an assignment.
Excellent.
So I wrote Undaunted because, hey, it's time for us to see this as an assignment,
All right.
which is why I put a lot of reflections and practices in the book that we can actually work with. And the subtitle is Living Fiercely. Living Fiercely
Fiercely.
um, in this milieu of climate meltdown in an authoritarian world. So stop living as a victim and start living fiercely.
Instead of fear. Although
Yeah,
we are confronting fear, though, we're
right. Well,
confronting a lot of fear
yes, we are,
everywhere.
but it's about learning to live with the fear and manage the fear rather than, oh my God, I'm scared, I can't go there.
Right.
Or letting the fear rule our lives. You know, it's about, okay, see, I start out the very first chapter of Undaunted talking about our emotions.
Hmm.
Fear is one of them, grief, anger, many, many different kinds of emotions come up as we think about collapse. And so we need to develop some emotional intelligence and skill in how we deal with these emotions so that we're not paralyzed by them.
And paralyzed is a very easy way to get when you look at the overwhelming inputs of just social media itself.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I
Uh,
literally took Twitter off my phone because I was checking it all the time, checking
right.
it. And yes, there's a collapse community that's awesome right there, but
Mhm.
everything else was making me it was making me crazy. So, uh the younger people that are with us, well, what would you say to them with just the limited experience that they're having getting through this world to cope with it, with the social
Well,
media onslaught of craziness?
let me say this not only to younger folks but to any of us.
Okay.
One of the things that I have discovered as I have been delving more deeply into trauma healing is that for some people, and I've discovered this with clients that I have worked with, for some people,
Yes.
collapse can actually be an escape from their trauma healing.
Oh.
Now, that may sound like really crazy off the wall.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is if we come to collapse awareness already carrying a certain amount of trauma, then instead of zeroing in on the healing that we need to do of our own nervous systems, of our own emotions,
Uh-huh.
we get all off into collapse because that's another drama.
Oh, yes.
And that stirs up more trauma. But hey, it takes me away from maybe a relationship I need to have and work on. It takes me away from, ways that I need to deal with my own wounding. Um, it sounds very counterintuitive, but I've seen it
Yeah.
many, many times. I'd rather deal with your trauma or that trauma out there than my
My
own.
own. Okay. It's really,
So
it is dealing with your
It's
own
very
self.
it's very subtle, and it's very seductive in many ways.
Okay. I'm going to go here. So
Go it.
I'm
Do
going to
it.
go here. In the collapsed community, the seductive, the words, the looking at the big picture, looking at everything from, as you say it, 35,000 feet above, and seeing this big picture.
Mhm.
I have been called a member of a cult.
Mm,
Okay.
mhm.
And I don't feel like I'm a member of a cult. I don't follow a leader. I don't worship at an altar. I don't there's no idolatry. But
Right.
what, if any, would you do in response to that? I mean, they could say, "Oh, you're the cult leaderess," the cult, whatever. I mean, this is really something that happened.
Well, I would certainly ask them why they think that. I mean, this is all about dialogue and listening, and not just fighting back, like, so why do you think I'm a cult leader? And how do
Yes.
you define a cult? And what am I doing or saying that causes you to believe I'm involved in cult? You
Well,
know,
I tried. I tried, but it was very difficult to do that with this person. And I feel like with our society being so segmented as we are, well, I'll ask you, do you think that there's going to be social cohesion? I mean, if we're being told we're in a cult, which is a separate thing from all the other, you could call many things cults, but do you think there's going to be some cohesion, Carolyn,
what do
in
you mean by cohesion exactly?
societies coming back together? Society. I mean, the world is in a war. You know, it's
Not for
like,
a long time. Not for a long time. And I think, what has happened now, I got to say, I love New York. What has happened with Trump's indictment,
oh, New
I
York.
I think is going to be this week is going to be very telling
Mm-hmm.
as he goes back to New York. Um, and what his MAGA followers are going to do is going to be very interesting. And certainly, I don't think you and I have ever seen our country as divided as it is now.
No.
And I'm thinking it's only going to get worse.
Some people
So,
would say that's a cult.
well, many people who are actually supporting Trump and participated in January 6th undoubtedly are involved in cults, many different kinds. So, people can call you what they want to call you, but are you looking at the facts? Are you critically thinking? Are you open to listening to people and dialoguing with people? Um,
Yeah,
that's
it's
all
not
you can
easy.
do.
It's not
No, it
always
isn't.
easy
No, it
because your
isn't. No.
first gut reaction is to say, well, they're wrong. And
Mhm.
a lot of it is just heightened by, well, again, going back to social media. I mean, how 100 years ago it was teletype, it was newspapers, it was just
Mhm.
the hand-to-hand delivery of information. The information got there, but not as instantaneous as today. And so,
I have I have a chapter
undaunted. How do you stay
I have
undaunted?
I have a chapter in Undaunted called, "They Don't See What I See." And it's about this whole notion of I can't talk to people who aren't aware of collapse. They just don't know what's going on. I can't talk with them. I'm different. I'm over here. I'm aware of collapse. They're not aware of collapse. They're over there. And so we don't really have anything in common. Why would I even want to be around them?
Mm.
And I refuse to listen to their bullshit. and blah, blah, blah. And so it's like when we get these accusations, they
Yeah.
are invitations, in my opinion, to dialogue. Now, you can't make people dialogue, but you should always, in my opinion, offer them the opportunity. So you say I'm in a cult. I'm curious as to why. Can you say more about that? You know,
But I
and
notice
then
it's blaming and
that opens the
gaslighting.
opportunity for dialogue and listening to each other, which is a novel idea these days in our culture.
All right, I'm listening. So I'm listening to you. And I've done that. And I find the insurmountable to be anger, and the anger that is manufactured outrage on a daily basis. And
Mhm.
I've tried this as part of my sacred activism to
Mhm.
understand. And I sometimes think that it is part of this whole collapse. And I wanted to ask you what you thought of that. That is history repeating itself in your eyes? Do you think that humanity is just inherently flawed? What do you think about all of the anger and these things that are going on now in relationship to your writing, let's say?
It's trauma.
There we
It
go.
really comes back to the trauma, to the personal wounding, that folks are terrified. The extreme right is terrified.
They
The
are.
extreme left is terrified. And I would say most people are walking around in a state of terror.
Terror. I'm
And
writing
so,
all this down.
some people are not capable of dialoguing, and we just have to accept that. But we give them every opportunity to dialogue with us. And if they're going to continue to accuse us falsely, then that's what they're going to continue to do.
And
In
there's
some instances, we can't control that.
exactly. And that's a big thing too, is thinking that we can even control anything.
Exactly.
People always, another thing they want to talk about, okay, we know fossil fuels are horrible. We've seen the results. That's why we're in a climate collapse. But yet we also know that green energy is kind of greenwashing, and it's just another form of business as usual and unlimited growth. And those paradigms, where do we go when everybody's arguing with everybody about how to get somewhere? Energy. No.
We do what we can to facilitate and encourage dialogue. And there are ground rules. When I do groups, I have certain ground rules for how we talk with each other. And, if somebody's going to be attacking, or they're incapable of listening and dialoguing, then I really don't want to have communication with that person because it's not possible.
So you do think that there are segments of society that are just not reachable,
Absolutely, I do. Absolutely.
and you
And
don't.
even within the collapse community, there are folks that have agendas. They're operating out of their trauma, and you know, they will or they won't learn to have boundaries around the way they communicate with other folks.
They should all read Radical Regeneration.
Yeah, yeah.
But of
That's
course, that's asking, like, for a miracle. And that is a good segue into the next book, actually.
okay.
I am, the Confronting Cristofascism. I have been making videos on critiques, like I make these small music videos, Cristofascism, but Nazism and things like that are happening in America. And then here's your book. And I let's start with, why did you write this one and the history you have? What can you teach us and help us and those of us who may be struggling trying to understand this whole phenomenon?
Well, a couple of years ago, in the midst of the pandemic, as I was looking at what was happening with, you know, Trump's absolutely ill managed, and that's being kind,
Uh-huh.
uh, uh, ability to deal with COVID, as I was looking at that, and then I was also watching the expansion of evangelical Christianity, particularly in his administration, and how
Mhm.
he was supporting evangelical Christians and they were supporting him. I felt like I had to write about it, particularly in the context of my own upbringing, which was evangelical Christianity. And, a lot of people, a lot of my friends were asking me, how can this guy call himself a Christian?
Right.
And how can people who are Christians support him? And so I wanted to clarify that by writing Confronting Cristofascism, giving a look at my background, what I learned from being in it, what I learned from getting out of it, and where I am today. And then, at the end of Undaunted, to go back to Undaunted for a minute, the
That's fine.
last part of Undaunted is about how do
Yeah.
we be undaunted in an authoritarian world. And there is a massive movement of fascism, not only in our country, but in the world.
That's
And
terrifying right
it's
there. Sometimes
really
even
terrifying.
more than the climate crisis.
Right, right. And so, as I move from confronting Christofascism into writing Undaunted, I didn't feel like I could just drop the Christofascism topic.
Right.
I felt like at the end of Undaunted, I needed to ask the question: how do we live in an undaunted way in an authoritarian world? And I don't have any magic bullet answers. One of the things I did was to allow us to look at some of the heroes and sheroes of people in the past who have resisted authoritarianism. And I think we need to really keep those folks in our hearts and minds and look at what they did, even though the times are different,
Oh,
but to appreciate their courage and their ability to resist and the wisdom that they gained from that. And one of the people that I'm a huge fan of course, is Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz
mhm.
and who really, really discovered the importance of meaning and purpose and how important it is to find and create meaning as we go through suffering.
Beaning as we go through suffering. Sounds like my everyday life.
Mhm.
But so many of us. I mean, I'm certainly not alone. My experiences translate to a lot of people that come to Environmental Coffee House.
Sure.
Um, so I wanted to also, within this, talking about Christofascism and this whole arena of how humanity has been through history with cults or idolatry or that tragic optimism. All right. I had heard that word, you were using it in one of the interviews, and I'm thinking to be optimistic in this authoritarian, right wing, very oppressive coming, let's say, how tell us about that term tragic optimism because it's compelling.
Well, that we are optimistic in certain ways, but also realizing the tragedy that always surrounds us.
Okay.
And one of the things that I talk about in all of my writing is the tension of the opposites. How, and Michael Dowd talks about this so much in his work on collapse acceptance. It's like here we are in this bleeding, broken, traumatized world, and yet we can find joy, and yet we can experience love. And so how do we hold those together? Because it's not all one or the other. It isn't all about denying collapse and I'm just going to go out and have a really good
Right.
time and just, be optimistic all over the place. And somebody's going to fix it somewhere, at some time. There's that approach. There's also the opposite, which is I'm going to go find a gun and I'm going to put a bullet in my
Yeah.
head because what the fuck and why am I here and why should I go on? And so, both opposites have some truth in them. And our work is not to decide, are we an optimist or a pessimist, but to hold both. And here's something I always get asked, and this is how I respond to it.
Okay.
In my interviews, people say, "Are you an optimist or a pessimist?" And I like to quote Meg Wheatley. And here's what Meg Wheatley says:
Okay.
either position, optimism or pessimism, keeps us from fully engaging with the complexity of this time. If we see only troubles or only opportunities, in both cases, we are blinded by our need for certainty,
Mm.
our need to know what's going on, to figure things out so we can be useful. The challenge is to refuse to categorize ourselves. We don't have to take sides or define ourselves as either optimist or pessimist. Much better to dwell in uncertainty, hold the paradoxes, live in the complexities and contradictions without needing them to resolve. And that's why
That
in
is.
Undaunted, I have an entire chapter called Unalterable Uncertainty.
Ah, this is pretty heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And I love what she wrote. You see,
Yeah.
I think a lot of us are struggling with the uncertainty, and on this channel, our chat, our people, our community, we are also growing older together, and there's
Mhm.
a lot of uncertainty in, wow, what's going to happen tomorrow? I mean, a lot of us don't even know where are we going to get. Some of us don't even know where are we going to be able to pay our bills. And I'm not just talking about me. I know what we've built here. So
Sure.
that's and when I looked at that word, the words tragic optimism, I'm thinking, well, it is kind of tragic to be optimistic in the time that we live in. Yet both ends of the spectrum that you just explained are nowhere to be. You don't want to be in either one. So Meg's
Right.
right.
So you hold the tension of the opposites, and that's a big job.
Yeah.
That's really hard work. And let me tell you about an article that I wrote just recently that is directly connected with this. And I got some flack for it, but that's great because I got people talking.
Good.
Um, so I talked about how um, there are basically three possible approaches to collapse. There are three responses. One is, okay, we're screwed. We are screwed, screwed, screwed. And I'm just if things get any worse, I'm just going to take myself out. I know that there's going to be total human extinction, and that's going to happen by a certain date. And you better believe that's going to happen by a certain date because if you don't, then you're my enemy, and blah, 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 blah. So it's worst case scenario on steroids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's the other side, which I call happy, clappy collapse acceptance,
Happy clappy. I'm sorry, but that's
which
pretty
can
good.
be,
Happy
which
clap.
can be,
I have to
oh,
write that down.
I've accepted collapse. I've
Yeah.
accepted. It's going to happen. I'm just going to have a good life.
Yeah.
Um, and that can be tricky. I think it is important as much as we can to accept collapse, but to also not rule out our need to do grieving. No
Which I
matter how
get.
much you've accepted collapse, you still need to grieve the loss. Otherwise, you're not being authentic. Otherwise, you're not being real and honest. There's a third approach, which I call Apocalypse Anytime, which is the title of my next book, which is, yep, I'm holding both of these perspectives. We are screwed. I don't know when it's going to happen, but
Right.
I'm pretty sure it's going to happen. And I'm accepting as much as I can and doing the grief work. And
Wow.
the apocalypse anytime perspective is I'm holding the tension of these opposites. I'm holding it, you know, both in the
That's
cup
not
of
easy
head.
to be
Not
where
either
that
or.
is, but it's not
It's
easy to
very
be where.
hard work. And that's why trauma work and trauma healing and grief work are so important so that we can do that. And I encourage people to start learning more about trauma. Go to YouTube and listen to people like Stephen Porges on the polyvagal theory
P O
of the
R
nervous system.
P O R G I
P O
S.
R G E S, Stephen
All right,
Porges,
I'll get a link in. Okay.
polyvagal, Polyvagal.
Okay. Thanks.
People like Peter Levine, Levine,
That one I've
people
heard
like
of.
Bessel van der Kolk, Bessel, Vanderkolk, and another wonderful woman named Deb Dana, who's written an excellent book that I encourage everyone to read. Short, sweet, very practical book, Anchored. The
Anchored.
title is Anchored
It's a good
by Deb
title.
Dana. Yeah.
You
And it's
know,
really practices for how you can regulate your nervous system in the face of trauma and upheaval.
excellent. This is all very good, helpful pointers for
These are
us.
people, these are people who can help us. And let me tell you, yeah, we have the worst situation on the planet that we've ever had, but never before in human history have we had so many tools for healing our trauma.
It's just finding them, knowing how to identify them, and networking with people who can help us uncover them, like you, for me,
Yeah.
and Dean
Well,
Walker.
yeah, exactly. And people who can be present with people as they're working on these things in collapse. I do a lot of coaching, I do a lot of spiritual counseling with folks who are struggling with all of these issues. It's my joy in life to be able to be present with these folks, and to share what I've learned and experienced, and to let them teach me as well.
That is critical because we never stop learning. And that
Absolutely.
that's always apparent that you're always learning, because when we learn or we take from others, that formulates our worldview and only helps us when we're in the kind, well, we're privileged to be able to do this.
Yes. Yes.
There are so
We
many
are.
that are not. And, you, you
I
know,
also want to say something here for
yes,
the younger folks.
yes.
Um, it is really important that, and I'm saying it to the elders too. It's really important that we have good elders now who can be present for younger folks. And I'm not talking about old people. There's
Right.
a difference between elder and older.
Hmm.
Elder is about wisdom, people who have learned how to be present with collapse and are developing their own wisdom. Because we all know people in their 80s and 90s who are children. They're not really wise, they're immature. And we all know people in their, at least I do, in their 20s and 30s who are wise beyond
Yeah.
their years.
Hmm.
So I love it when elders and youngers come together and they can really talk about what's happening on our planet, and elders who can be responsible, take responsibility, and apologize. Everywhere I go, when I encounter young people and we're on this topic, I make it a point
Hmm.
to make amends and to say, my generation, the boomers, we've done more to destroy this planet than any generation in history. And I'm really sorry. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't cancel it. But I need to take responsibility for my generation and say, I apologize.
In that vein, though, as we have gone through how many decades, was it always our fault? I mean, I look at life and I say, well, a lot of us were just plunked in this system. It's a systems, thing. I could say I'm sorry for my generation, but I'm more sorry for the systems that have been allowed to proliferate and destroy the planet. A-
Both I think are important to own. That yes, we were plunked in a system when we grew up in the 50s. What did we know? We didn't know anything better. And it's not about
Exactly.
blaming oneself. It's about saying, I take responsibility for
Yeah.
this. And by the way, how can I help you right now?
Yeah, there you
Is there
go.
anything I can do for you and with you?
I like that. The
Yeah,
helping, the being, I say help or be, I feel like I'm growing into a role of, well, I did a show on being a crone and how
yeah,
it's positive, and it was fun, and I wanted to do it for a long time. And I was even reading everybody their crone card. I have a deck of cards, and it's all these different things. But that brings me to the spiritual, to go full circle, the spirituality versus religiosity. uh
right.
um how do you define that, actually, to help people that may be grappling with becoming a fully, what, collapse aware or post-doom, whatever you want to label it? How do you the spirituality, how do you get that spirituality if you don't have it, or if you're looking for it? How does that come?
Well, one of the ways I think that is really useful is to pay attention to our grief,
Interesting.
because if we allow ourselves to fully grieve what is happening, um, two things happen at least, many things happen, but it takes us deeper into all of our emotions
Hmm.
and makes us much more whole and compassionate. And ironically, and again, this might sound counterintuitive, we discover deeper levels of joy. As I've done grief workshops and worked with folks for many, many years around grieving, invariably what I discover is that folks tell me, as I let myself grieve honestly and fully about this with the support of others, I discovered I have more joy. And my joy isn't contingent on being happy. It's just something that lives inside of me that I
Hmm.
discover. All of that is spirituality. Has nothing to do with religion, has nothing to do with
Right.
churches, has nothing to do with authority figures. It's all in here. And my emotions, my honest grieving can take me to that. That's why it's so important not to get happy clappy about collapse acceptance.
Right. Like, oh, we have the WASF hats,
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
I mean, it's like, oh, it's almost like a kitschy little joke, but
right.
in reality, it's really not. you know.
Yeah.
But I'm one of those that I try to find the humor in probably mostly everything, because, like, I don't know if it's a defense mechanism or if it's just me, but I find humor in even some really pretty sad shit, because
Hmm.
maybe it's more irony, humor, irony. But all right,
The other
well,
thing,
oh,
the
go
other
ahead.
thing that helps, other thing that helps cultivate spirituality is
Yes.
is to give your gifts in the world in ways that can help your community. Are you serving? Are you doing anything in your community or anywhere to make life better? And so
That
as you engage in sacred activism, as you give away your gifts, um, as you open your heart in that way, you very definitely will connect with deeper layers of spirituality that maybe you didn't even know were there.
that's nice. That helps me. That's because a lot of times, me, or I've talked to others who say, well, I don't know what I can do. Write a letter. I mean, anything. You
Mhm.
can do little things. And like I say, my sacred activism is growing food. And I mean, as sick as this sounds, I find joy in squash bugs, but I
Yeah,
found this. Uh, uh,
yeah,
through time, and I work hard. And I find hard work seems to be something that keeps me going. I don't know if it's, I think a lot of people feel that way also. Just keep going. Something drives you, Carolyn. You're driven. What would you say in your hard work and your writing? What drives you?
I think what drives me is that I know we're in a crisis, and it's like the house is on fire. And, what can I do to get people out of the burning flames and help them, regather themselves, recollect themselves, and not be devastated by the fire that's going on? That they can go from that burning building, and they can then really develop the lives that they want to have, even in the midst of trauma. Um, and so there's always something we can do. You know,
Always.
what happens is that, and this is part of media, we see these things like the IPC reports, and let's honor the IPCC reports. Let's
Well,
not
we go through
flush those
them.
down the toilet. But we begin to believe that if we're going to make a difference, it has to be enormous. We have to be another Greta. We have to go out there and get thousands of people to change their way of life and march in the streets and blah, blah, blah. And that is a
Mm.
recipe for despair, because hope and fear travel together. And when you get into this grandiosity of, oh, I've got to do something to create hope and blah, 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 what it's a setup to fail. And so instead of doing that, let's concentrate on our own little patch of life, and let's make a difference there. Maybe it's just the smallest thing. Like, I just got an email a while ago from the Boulder Valley Humane Society, and they normally don't ask for money for dog surgeries, but they found this dog that was just really in bad shape, and they sent out this bulletin, can you help pay for this surgery?
Uh, oh,
And so it's like, yeah, I can give $20,
yeah.
you know? Or is there some person on the street who's homeless that I could talk to? Not just give money, but I
Yeah.
could talk to. And I developed, back in 2014, I developed a friendship with a homeless guy that I still have. And this guy changed my life. And you can read all about it in a book that I wrote called Journey to the Promised Land. It's one of my memoirs that, it kind of gets overlooked because people are looking at my collapse stuff.
Yeah.
But don't miss Journey of the Promised Land. I promise
You hear
you,
that, everybody?
the
Mm-mm.
subtitle is How a Homeless Stranger Took Me Home.
Oh,
So, there are many things we can do. And instead of thinking, oh, it's not big enough,
right.
just do it.
Do it. Just do it. That's a great message. It is. I mean, there are people doing big things, but the big things are in a collective, like
Yes,
Extinction Rebellion. They're a
yes,
collective. They're not
yes.
just, nobody's alone in
Right,
that. There's Jim
right.
McHenry, who does his climate change protest every Friday, even if nobody comes, in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, every Friday. And he
Right.
is online and he's articulate as hell. And he explains the predicament we're in with clarity. There are a lot of people in our communities that are amazing, and I think that they don't feel that they have to do something so big, then it's overwhelming, and then they're paralyzed, can't do
Right.
anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I vacillate sometimes, with that. But that's why I have the amazing people around me like you. And so, why don't we come full circle and tell us what's next for you and where people can find you and your books and all that?
So the next thing for me is Apocalypse Anytime, which is the subtitle is an interspiritual devotional for a World on Fire. And it's filled with practices, reflections, and practices for how you maintain, how you ground yourself from day to day in what we are dealing with. And that's going to be out on, sometime in May, and it's going to be on Amazon and
Oh,
available everywhere. My website
that's
is
interesting.
carolynbaker.net. And like I said, I do spiritual counseling and life coaching, collapse coaching. And every day, as you know, I publish a daily
Yes.
news digest that covers economics, environmental,
Everything.
world news, and on and on. But it has at the end of it something that no other news service has, which is an inspiration section. And on Sundays, I publish something called the Sunday Post,
Yep.
which is nothing but a story or a video of inspiration.
Oh, I've been getting your daily news digest for years, years.
Uh,
I've even
yeah,
lifted stuff that you got and put it on
yeah,
Environmental Coffee House because I was lazy because you did the work, to be quite honest. But Carolyn's,
that's
she's amazing, guys. I am so happy that you could go through some of these topics with me today that I'm wrestling with. And if I'm wrestling with it, then some of our family viewers are wrestling with
absolutely,
these. And
absolutely,
they can find your stuff and they can read your books and maybe get a little healing going on.
yeah. And you can subscribe to the Daily News Digest at my website. Click on the
Mhm.
subscription tab, and you're in.
Awesome. That's beautiful. Well, I want to thank you. I appreciate this time that you took. I could have very easily turned this into a therapy session, but I've had so many things. You're going to have to come back when Jennifer returns and come back
I
with us
would love
again because
to.
we need to pick up this conversation
I
with
would love
her.
to.
All right.
Yeah,
That's great.
definitely. Yeah, I miss her, and I can't wait for her to come back.
Yep. Oh, it's just a short little stint. She'll be back with me on Friday nights, guys. Nobody has to worry about that. So
All right.
thank
Thank
you,
you so much,
Carolyn.
Sandy.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
great to be with you.
Right now it's got about a mile wide. Look at the upward rising motion. Look at the counterclockwise rotation with this. There are farmsteads. There are a few small towns. Does anybody have a? Can anybody look up the name of the towns for me? I can't.
I think it was Hedrick.
Yeah.
I got no.
So this is about east of Hedrick, somewhere in the Hedrick, Iowa. But we're southwest of Washington. We're northeast of Ottumwa.
There it is. You can kind of see the debris. It's very, very small, but something is being hit. One of these things.
This is moving away from us. It's all right.
Yeah.
We're fine. The tornado is and this makes it look farther away than it is, but the tornado is right there, guys. Look above the power poles and the power lines. It's right there. See that clear spot right above that? That's the rear flank downdraft gut. Tornado is right in front of us. Tornado is right in front of us here. See, it's right in the field. It looks on Facebook Live, it looks farther away than it really is, but it's not.
This tornado is probably within a mile and a half of us right now. Mile and a half. We got a tornado or a tour van right beside us too.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. And I wanted to show you what's going on in the Midwest of the United States. It is quite scary. I think that it's what a week. I mean, a month early for these tornadoes, and they are flattening towns. And I just wanted to say that after an interview like that, and then you think about all of the trauma that these people are going through and the trauma that people are going through all over the world. There are fires in Spain. I mean, just everywhere. Uh, We need to spread the message, I suppose. Carolyn's been trying to do it forever and a long time. And she's written like 14 books. Everything's in the show notes. Those links to people that she talked about, that's in the show notes. So let's do a few comments before I go. And I very much appreciate you coming. I enjoyed doing this today. Absolutely. So anybody have any questions or comments that you'd like to make? Oh, Malawi. Oh my God. It's just, there's too much. And there's going to be climate change refugees, migrations are happening. And what do we do? How do you reach people that have trauma that don't even know how they can deal with it? I mean, these people in these states that are getting hit, wow, I can't even imagine. And I got hit by a tornado in 2017 and it was traumatic. And when we get the tornado warnings and they happen now every year, I get panicked. I've told you this before. I get like a post-traumatic stress response, and it's really very uncomfortable. So yes, Melanie, I was watching Ryan Hall before I came in here to run this, and he donates a lot of money to these towns. He makes a lot on his YouTube channel, but he donates a shit boatload. So there's a lot of them. Tornado chasing is becoming extremely popular. In fact, Nicholas Humphrey was before he was a meteorologist, he was a tornado hunter. And I've watched his old videos. And in fact, in his old opening video, I showed his tornado chasing work. But anyway, thank you, Mendy, for coming. I'm really very happy you all did come. And it looks to me like there's not, well, let's see, Rudy. Hi, Rudy. There's still quite uncertainty over the timeline. Our generation might still be relatively okay, but our young kids, and don't we know it? And that's another thing we feel traumatized by. Those of us with kids. I don't have any grandchildren. I won't, but I mean, those of us with children and grandchildren and all, and that are aware, collapse aware, we can only impart our wisdom. And whether that is growing food, preparing ourselves emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, knowing when to take a break from the onslaught, like I said, the onslaught of the never-ending blink and it's a different piece of news. Blink and you know what's going on all over the world. It is very different times than it ever was for anybody, any humans in history, with the information. But well, thank you guys. Any kind of comments, because I will tell you guys again then, please like and subscribe and buy us a coffee. It sure helps me with the channel. And you know what? Thank you to those of you who do it and do donate. I have to say my gratitude is pretty big right now, especially. There's a couple of things I do want to have. I don't need to have for this channel, but thank you. I have a lot of gratitude. Kinky Streets and Nadia and your mama and Kim, thank you for moderating. Earl's here and we haven't flushed, and I'm just going to do a quick little flush. And what would you guys, what should we flush today? What do you think we should flush? I'm going to think I mean, wouldn't it be nice to be able to flush away climate change? Wouldn't it be nice to flush away come on, guys, PTSD? Flush away Donald Trump. God. I'm not following it because it's exhausting. And I've told you this already. I took Twitter off my phone because it was ridiculous. But all right. Well, thank you everyone. And I love you. And I will be back. What is today's Friday? Tuesday night with a show. And next Friday night is Jennifer will return, I think. And if I can fit something in, I will. It's that season where I'm setting up all my flats and my lights and then having to try to clean out the greenhouse. So it's busy. But if you have pictures of what you're starting with your gardens for the Disabled Abled Gardener series on this channel, please email them to me at environmentalcoffeehouse@gmail.com. I'm starting to make the folders so that during the season, I'll do the shows on what everybody else is doing and growing, not just me. Okay. And we'll do that with the Disabled Abled Gardener. So, thank you so much. All right. So guys, have a most wonderful weekend and I will see you on the flip side. Okay. Thank you, guys. Thank you.